Ladies and gentlemen, these are the things I love about the Honda S660 Modulo X kei-car. And we are out here in Tokyo, Japan, returning this little bad boy. The first thing is actually the looks it gets. It's very positive attention. Seen a handful of kids just walking by on the streets, pointing at the car, even some adults. Positive vibes, positive looks, positive interactions. I think the car looks cool. It's futuristic. I think the looks are polarizing to some, but it's cool, it's sporty, it's very much Honda, especially from the front. And the rear, they're doing this kind of newer thing, which I think really works on a car like this. The first thing I don't like is actually the seating position. Now, obviously, if you're a taller person like me, I'm 6'1", it's gonna be harder to sit in this tiny kei-car, but I do fit. Yes, my head is touching the targa, and if I go all the way back the way I want to, my head hits this roll bar, which is not ideal. So if I were to buy one of these cars, let's say hypothetically, I get a place in Japan and I visit a few months per year and I want a car, I would totally consider this, but what I would do is get an aftermarket seat that allows me to sit even lower. This car already, you already are sitting pretty low. I don't want you to think that you're sitting high, but if you are a taller person, it's not low enough. So from a seating position, it feels low, but because of the roofline being so low, you need to go even lower. And aftermarket seat, and probably also a telescoping wheel so I can get a little bit further back and have the wheel closer to me. As for the pedal box, I wear size 13 shoes, and just something you gotta get used to. Heel toe is not the easiest or prettiest thing. Honda transmissions are the best in the business. Yes, better than Porsche. You look at something like a Honda S2000, that is, in my opinion, the gold standard. The best manual transmission I've ever driven. Ow. Got our little ETC card. Such a joy to use, super notchy. This is not quite S2000 good or NSX good, but it's pretty close. The next best thing. Definitely better than the front-wheel drive Honda transmissions like the Civic Type R, Integra Type S. The next thing I love is the interior, and it's just so purpose-built, so unique. You have, look at this tachometer with the speedo digital readout in the center, saving space, tiny little area, so they're making the most of it, which I love. Very purpose built, right? It feels intentional, it feels driver oriented. And with this Modulo X, you get this nice Bordeaux red trim, right here. Over here, the materials, they're passable, they're not luxurious by any means. But for a car like this, which brand new was, I think, between $16,000 to $25,000 depending on the trim. Now used around 12 to 18K. I think it's a totally adequate interior space. Next thing I don't like is actually the road noise. And a small lightweight car like this, it weighs 1,850 pounds. Actually a little bit less if you go manual, a little bit more if you go CVT. Obviously you gotta get this with the manual. Why would you ever get this with the CVT? But it's quite noisy on the highway, and here in Japan, you're going maybe 60 to 70 miles an hour on the highway, and it can get pretty noisy. By the way, one thing a lot of people don't appreciate, if something is too easy, you don't enjoy it, right? So driving in Japan, the roads have been challenging. We don't read Japanese, gotta go by the maps. I've made a few wrong turns here and there in the last 24 hours. But the challenge, right, of driving on the opposite side of the road, opposite side of the car, even the turn signal being on this side, that took me quite a bit of time to get used to. Probably half a dozen, times of hitting the windshield wiper rather than the turn signal. And it's part of the fun, actually. If you haven't driven stick shift in another country, I highly recommend it. I've done the UK, I've done Cape Town, South Africa, and now Japan. And the first day or two, in particular, as you get adjusted, is really exciting, really fun. And then after that, you get more acclimated, it's not as special anymore. The other thing is being here in Japan during cherry blossom season. I bought a SBGA 443 Grand Seiko Shunbun. It's essentially Grand Seiko's watch to celebrate the cherry blossom. They have a lot of these seasonal watches, and you're going to be seeing more watches in the upcoming videos. But going back to the car, the next thing I love, which I can't show you right now, is actually the engine. It's a small 658cc turbocharged 3-cylinder, and I prefer naturally aspirated engines, but the kei-cars, this is a kei-car, and they have certain dimension limitations as well as engine displacement limitations of 660cc's or smaller. To get more power out of it, Honda has to, of course, do forced induction. And they've actually changed the turbo geometry so that it spools up faster, less lag, which you notice, it's actually pretty quick, but it still retains this fun character and the sound, and it encourages you to rev it out. Whereas in many other turbocharged cars, you know, the torque's down low and kind of dies off near red line. This one does not. It actually, peak torque is in the upper rev range, and after around 5,000 RPM, the engine really comes alive. It's, you know, the noise. Let's see if I can do something here for you guys just to show you. We're in second gear, 5,000. And the red line is 7,700 RPM, which is pretty high for a turbocharged engine. Next thing I don't like about the car is the steering. I feel like a lot of more recent Hondas, and this car was produced 2015 to 2022, the EPS is just it's a bit numb. With everything else in the car being so good, you notice the electric power steering being more numb. And in a regular car, it wouldn't really bother you. There's a tiny amount of feedback, but mid-corner, you're not getting much load up at all. But because the transmission is so good, the engine is so good, the chassis is so good, the steering is definitely lacking. Out of all the inputs, it's the weakness. Going back to the interior, you'll see that there's this white glow around the center speed readout. You press the select button, it changes the gauge colors to red, and you can also see the colors on the side as well. Changes it from white to red, and on the left-hand side, this left screen, it changes from real-time fuel efficiency to your turbo spooling up. Nice little touch. Another thing I don't like about the car is the complete lack of storage space. So, if you get this car, it's not going to be your primary, your only daily driver. There is, in the frunk, a teeny little area for this target top. You roll it up and you put it in there. You could theoretically fit something really small in there, but based on the shape, the depth, the size, you're not really fitting much of anything, to be honest. And you have to be okay with that because there's no hidden compartments in the interior either. It is teeny tiny. In the rear, it's just the engine. There's no storage there at all. And that's what you expect with a sporty little kei-car like this. And kei-cars aren't even meant to be sporty, so we should be appreciative that this is kind of like the reincarnated Honda Beat from the 1990s, if you will. And the last thing I love, it's got to be the price. Small, cheap cars like this, I mean, we do have the Mazda Miata in the US, but this makes a Mazda Miata look large and expensive. With this being such a small, affordable car, it's easy to look past the small trade-offs. And I'm saying small, not just, you know, no pun intended, they are small trade-offs, like the storage space or whatever other issues you have for the car. Because it's so cheap and so fun and so enjoyable, you can't really hold it against it. It's such an amazing car. 12 to 18K on the used market right now, sold only in Japan, nowhere else. I would not want to drive this in the US because in the US we have these massive vehicles, faster speed limits, and I just don't want to be pancaked by some Karen texting in her, you know, Escalade or whatever. In Japan, vehicles are a little bit smaller, speed limit's a little bit lower. I could totally see myself owning and driving one of these if I ever, you know, got a place here in Japan. But my friends, let me know what you think of the Honda S660 Modulo X. Subscribe if you haven't already. Much love. See you all in the next one.